yes, sir. Go ahead, Don.
I was just going to say, as you say this, I'm sure many people are saying, how is it that the United States officially got pulled into this war in the 90s on behalf of what I'm hearing you say is really a policy of usurpation, Albanian Muslims usurping authority and control and being granted it by Tito and those who followed in a province that has historically been part of Serbia, another country altogether. I guess it would be comparable to one of our southern states being overtaken by Mexico, let's say. California comes to mind, and literally the controls of that state or province being tacitly given over.
That's right, except it's a lot worse because last time I checked, most Mexicans were not jihadists.
Yes, absolutely. Thank God.
But you're right. There's an interesting sleight of hand there too, because the whole premise of Kosovo independence rests on defining the Albanians as the Muslim Albanians in Kosovo as a majority. And of course, they're not a majority; they're a minority within Serbia. You think of the precedents being set here that if you have a state with an ethno-religious minority, especially a violent Muslim minority, they can say, well, the area in which we live, we constitute the majority, and you're the minority, and we demand the right to self-determination, and if we can't get it through legal means, we'll get it through violent means. If we can't fight for it ourselves, we'll get some other countries to come in here, ostensibly helping the underdogs, helping the victims, and deliver to us on a platter. And that's what they now expect from the United States. And I think one of the reasons that this, there are a couple of reasons why I think this happened. One is they had a very good lobby coming into this back in the 1990s. They were able to sell the message, as I just delivered to you, that somehow they're the victims here. Secondly, again, anytime there's a counter-terrorist action, whether it's by Israel, whether it's by our forces in Iraq, we've had, some of these unfortunate stories of, war crimes committed by U.S. troops. Counter-terrorism wars, by their nature, are very, very messy. And it's, you think, how would we like this by an outside power looking at some of the accusations against U.S. forces in Iraq and saying, we're going to act as judge, jury, and executioner in these cases, and we will decide whether your forces have acted correctly or not, and we'll come in and bomb the United States because we think you've acted badly. I mean,
that's basically really what we did.
That's basically what we did. Now, does that mean that some bad things did not occur? No, it doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that the nature of...
Nobody ever said that Milosevic was a saint by a long shot.
That's right.
I always argued, number one, that the premise for going to war, why did we selectively choose him to go after when there are so many others of his ilk on the planet? And two, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me we stood NATO on its head in terms of its historic purpose.
That's right.
It was never meant to be an attack mechanism at all for any country. It was intended as a defensive mechanism. Am I right?
That's absolutely right. And I think whether we're talking about then or even more so now, I think there's something else lurking here. And I think there are some people who have this idea that if we can show never mind American support for Israel, never mind Iraq, we can show we're not anti-Muslim. Look, we're helping the Muslims here in Kosovo. And in fact, if you look at the 9/11 Commission final report, it's very interesting. The references to many references to Bosnia and even some to Kosovo as examples where al-Qaeda broke out of its birthplace in the Afghan-Pakistan border region and became a global force capable of hitting the United States. So, what then do the recommendations of the Commission call for? More examples where we can show our pro-Muslim bona fides like we did in Bosnia and Kosovo. I think there's a complete misreading of the Islamic mind here. If you look at any jihadist website, you see right down the list, Palestine, Chechnya, Kashmir, Iraq, Philippines, and Kosovo and Bosnia as places where the Ummah, the Muslim nation, the church almost, so to speak, is fighting with the infidel. We've got this fellow down in Guantanamo, for example, David Hicks. Some people may have heard the name. You can look it up on the internet. He's an Australian convert to Islam who served with the Kosovo Liberation Army against the Serbs, later then was captured by U.S. forces when we overthrew the Taliban after 9/11. Who do you think got him to Kosovo? The Salvation Army? It was al-Qaeda. Mm-hmm. And as I said, the thing about, and what is amazing to me, in fact, I just had a meeting at the State Department today, is almost a phobia against admitting that there is a radical Islamic element to the struggle. When I was in Kosovo just this past week, I mean, you cannot swing a cat in Kosovo these days without hitting a spanking new Saudi Wahhabist mosque being paid for by Saudi. I saw one with a Saudi flag. I mean, of course, these come complete with the radical literature and so forth. We are seeing, you're looking at a land, what once was a land of Christians and churches, becoming a land of mosques and Muslims under violence and the threat of violence, and with a kind of a benign oversight by the international community, and including, unfortunately, elements of our government.
That's what we want to come back to more with Jim Jatras. Jim is an attorney with Venable Law Firm here in Washington, D.C., the authorized representative for Kosovo's Orthodox Christian Serbian community, and for many years served as a policy analyst for the Republican leadership in the U.S. Senate, also serving as a diplomat with the U.S. State Department. We'll be back in a moment. www.savekosovo. That's all one word, save, Kosovo.org, savekosovo.org. With me is a spokesperson for this effort to save Kosovo, and it is, of course, Jim Jatras, who's here in the studios with me, and I just want to read a sentence, and then, Jim, you can comment. This is a couple of sentences, actually, by the Prime Minister of Serbia. July 12th, Washington Post op-ed piece, Justice for Serbia, Kosovo Independence Imperils Our Democracy, in which he stated, depriving a democratic country of part of its territory simply because one ethnic group that has aspirations for that territory threatens violence is impermissible, and not only morally, but also from the perspective of historical experience, wrong. Indeed, tragic occurrences have taught mankind that a policy of appeasement toward those who threaten force only opens the way to more and even greater violence, and so forth. So this is really the message that the Serbian people and the Serbian leadership are trying to communicate here in the United States and elsewhere, is that there's a lot at stake here, and if you said a bit ago, the first and foremost, it's illegal.
It's illegal. There's nothing under the UN Charter that allows the detachment of a country by outside forces, by outside states against that country's will, and that's what's being contemplated here. And of course, Prime Minister Koštunica, who you just quoted a minute ago, he ought to know this is the man who translated the Federalist Papers into Serbian. I mean, this man is a great constitutional scholar, and we know what it's like in our country to have political divisions on hot issues, and trust me, in Serbia we have very, very sharp divisions on just about everything. This is not one of them. This is one from all across the political spectrum. Every politician, every party is absolutely united. They will not agree to this.
Let me ask you this. What, in a few words or several if you need to, is the vested interest of the average American listening today? They say, I don't even know if I can find Kosovo on the map. Why should I get up in arms even during this special week here in Washington? What's at stake here? Obviously, I want you to reiterate what's at stake for the Serbian people and the Christian community in specific, but what's at stake for the average American?
Well, there are a couple things at stake. One is the precedent I just talked about. Do we really want to set the precedent where we can be condemning our country sometime in the future to say, if we can break off a piece of this country, what's to stop us from breaking off a piece of yours? That's the first thing. Secondly, we cannot underestimate that once if this were to go through, and I don't think it will, by the way, I think we're going to win this, and I think that's why we need the help of your listeners, that once this were to go through, sure, the Christian Serbian community in Kosovo would be the first victim, but they would not be the only one. Kosovo is already the black hole of organized crime, drugs, slaves. It's also, there are reliable reports that the explosives for the Madrid and London bombings came through Kosovo. We will see a sharp increase in instability, not only in that region of Europe, but elsewhere into Europe. Now, given the American security commitment to Europe, and indeed what we hope should be a united Western civilization against jihad, terror, and organized crime, which, as your listeners know, are very closely linked, we will not be bringing stability and peace to this region. We will be giving a major boost to these forces of instability and terror that will help confront us later on. So I think that's the larger risk for the United States by taking what appears to some people to be the easy route out of the Balkans. Well, we've had this force deployed there for a long time. There's no end in sight. Let's impose what on the surface might seem to be the easy way out, rather than say, look, who's the reliable partner here? Who is the indigenous Christian community here whose interest, if they're protected, can also, if we handle this properly, be reconciled with not the maximalist violent aspirations of the Albanian Muslims, but the reasonable aspirations. That, look, you can look all over Europe, and there are certainly radicals among many of the Muslim communities there. There are also millions of Muslims who live under secular laws in Christian majority states who abide by those laws and all of whose rights are respected. Show me where the comparable freedom and safety of a Christian community is in an Islamic world. So I think that's what we're asking for here, a genuine negotiation that will accommodate the real interests of the people of Kosovo. And in that respect, I would ask our listeners to go to savekosovo.org and read the bishop's letter. This is Bishop Artemia, who's in town this week. His letter to President Bush, writing as a Christian pastor to a believing Christian statesman here in the United States, to sort of lay out with love and charity what is really being asked by the Serbian side, not only for themselves, but also for their Muslim Albanian neighbors, not just to have a violent jihadism imposed on them by